Hello girls and boys. Welcome back to Read Me a Story. I'm Pat Kozyra, and hello as well to my grandchildren, Max and Theo and Josephine, Charlotte, Penelope, and Simon. Girls and boys, I want to talk first about my book. I wrote this book, so I'm the author. It's called Tips and Tidbits for Parents and Teachers. This is for your mums and dads to read, and it will tell them all about my 50 years of teaching in the classroom, and it will help them to help you at home with your schoolwork. They can get it from amazonbooks.com. All right, so today, girls and boys, we're going to have another session with our little wolf here, who's all dressed up. Many stories use the wolf to teach us lessons. And the wolf sometimes gets a bad rap. I think we've mentioned this before. Wolves are really great animals, and the more we learn about wolves, the more we know how important they are in nature to us. This is a classic, Little Red Riding Hood, and of course there's a wolf in this story too. This is one of the favorite fairy tales that girls and boys like. Little Red Riding Hood. Here we go. In a small village near a forest, there lived a little girl with her mother. The little girl had a red riding hood, which she wore all the time. So everyone called her Little Red Riding Hood. One day, the mother baked lots of cakes, and she asked Little Red Riding Hood to visit her grandmother, who lived in the next village, and take her some cakes. And as she gave Little Red Riding Hood a basket of cakes, she said, "Go by the road and don't talk to strangers. And don't go into the forest." Little Red Riding Hood nodded and went happily on her way. She loved visiting her grandmother, who lived in a pretty cottage beside the forest. As she was walking along the road, Little Red Riding Hood saw some lovely flowers growing in the forest. "I shall pick some for Grandma," she thought. Forgetting her mother's advice, she ran into the forest and she plucked a large bunch of flowers. But then she could not find the way back to the road. Little Red Riding Hood was scared, and she began to cry. And just then someone said, "Little girl, why do you cry?" She looked around and she saw a wolf standing behind a tree. "I've lost my way, Mr. Wolf," she said. "Will you show me the way back to the road?" "Of course I will," said the wolf. "Come with me." And as they walked together, the wolf asked, "What is your name, little girl? And where are you going?" "Oh, everyone calls me Little Red Riding Hood," she replied. "I'm going to visit my grandma, who lives in the cottage by the forest." The wolf had not eaten for 3 days, and he wanted to gobble up the little girl at once, but when he heard of the grandmother who lived on her own, he became greedy, and he thought that he would eat up both of them, the girl and her grandmother. So, leaving the little girl at the roadside, he ran off into the forest. Taking a shortcut, he soon arrived at the grandmother's cottage, and he knocked at the door. "Who is it?" someone asked. "It is I, Grandma," said the wolf in a little girl's voice. "The door is open, so come right in," Grandmother said. And the wolf walked in, and he pounced on the old woman, and she was too weak to fight, and the wolf bundled her up into a cupboard. Then he lay down in the bed. He pulled the covers over himself, and he waited for the little girl. And soon he heard a knock at the door. "Who is it?" the wolf said in the old woman's voice. "It is Little Red Riding Hood, Grandma," cried the girl. "I'm not well," said the wolf. "The door is open, so come right in." Little Red Riding Hood came in. "Here are some cakes and some flowers for you, Grandma," she said. But then she looked at her grandmother in surprise. "What big ears you have, Grandma," she said. "The better to hear you with, child," said the wolf in Grandma's voice. "And what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with." "And what big hands." "The better to hold you with." "And such big teeth." "The better to eat you with," the wolf growled. And he jumped out of bed, and Little Red Riding Hood screamed in fear. A woodman on his way in the forest heard the scream, and he ran into the cottage, and he saw the wolf about to attack the child. And he picked up a large frying pan, and he knocked the wolf senseless. And then he heard the grandmother banging against the cupboard door, and he let her out. Little Red Riding Hood was so happy to see Grandma alive, and ran into her arms, and the two of them thanked the woodman, and gave him some of the cakes. As far as the wolf, the woodman tied him up, dragged him back to the forest, and left him there. The wolf, who had hoped to eat a girl and her grandmother, had to chew rope instead. Oh my, what an ending to that book. And girls and boys, I think if there's a lesson to be learned here, it is to remember what your parents say to you about strangers. Don't talk to strangers. And I think you know that. Hope you enjoyed that story of Little Red Riding Hood, girls and boys. See you next time for Read Me a Story. Bye for now.